August 6, 1945, 8:15 hours. Imperial General Headquarters, Tokyo. A single decoded transmission from Hiroshima shattered 3 years of carefully maintained illusions about industrial warfare. What Japan's high command read in that message forced them to confront a truth they had denied for the entire war: America had never been fighting at full strength. They had been holding back. 90 feet beneath the Imperial Palace, the reinforced concrete war room thrummed with the dull routine of a nation losing a war. Field Marshal Shunroku Hata's morning intelligence briefing had become a ritual of slow decline. But at exactly 8:15, Lieutenant Colonel Tishiro Yamamoto burst through the steel door, without the expected bow, holding a decoded message that would redefine everything Japan's leadership believed about the conflict. The transmission, sent moments before Hiroshima fell silent, was brief and broken: entire city destroyed by single bomb. Blast radius beyond any recorded bombardment. Weapon type unknown. Casualties catastrophic. Request immediate. The message cut off abruptly. General Yoshiro Umezu, chief of the Imperial General Staff, read it 3 times. His first instinct was to assume a massive conventional attack, perhaps 500 B-29s dropping incendiaries at once. Nothing else seemed mathematically possible. Hiroshima, after all, was a city of 350,000 people spread over 27 square miles. But as more reports trickled in throughout the morning, it became clear that the destruction did not match any known form of bombing. Whether reconnaissance, whether reports confirmed what should have been impossible, only 3 B-29s had flown over Hiroshima that morning. 3 aircraft, not 300. Admiral Suemu Toyota, chief of the Naval General Staff, stood before the vast wall map tracking every known American asset across the Pacific. His intelligence teams had become experts at reading U.S. operations, their bomber formations, their payloads, their expected patterns of destruction. Nothing in 3 years of war suggested that 3 planes could annihilate an entire city. By 10 o'clock hours, reconnaissance flights attempting to approach Hiroshima reported something no pilot had ever witnessed. A towering mushroom-shaped cloud climbed past 40,000 feet, visible from 150 miles away. It glowed with unnatural colors, purples and oranges that seemed to pulse from within. At 11:30 hours, Foreign Minister Shigenori Togo received the first eyewitness testimony. A railway official stationed 15 miles from Hiroshima described a flash brighter than 1,000 suns, followed by a pressure wave so violent it derailed trains. He reported that the city center had simply ceased to exist, replaced by a raging firestorm visible from the distant hills. The Supreme War Council convened at 1400 hours in absolute silence. Prime Minister Kantaro Suzuki, who had survived multiple assassination attempts merely for suggesting peace, read the collected reports. His hands trembled slightly as he set them down. "Gentlemen," he began softly, "we must consider what this means." War Minister General Korechika Anami, the fiercest advocate for continuing the fight, spoke first. "American propaganda," he insisted, "they want us to believe they possess weapons they do not. Hiroshima was destroyed by conventional bombing, and they used deception to claim it was done by 3 aircraft. Admiral Toyota cut him off, something unthinkable under normal circumstances. 3 aircraft, Anami-san. Our radar tracked them. Our observers confirmed them. 3. Silence fell, heavy as ash. For 3 years, Japanese military doctrine had rested on a single belief: America's vast industrial power could be neutralized by Japanese spirit, discipline, and tactical brilliance. The Americans could build more ships, more planes, more tanks, but Japanese soldiers would fight with such ferocity that U.S. casualties would become intolerable. This belief had shaped every decision since Pearl Harbor. When America built 300,000 aircraft, Japanese commanders insisted their pilots, though outnumbered, carried 10 times the spirit. When American shipyards churned out cargo vessels faster than German U-boats could sink them, Japan reassured itself that American sailors lacked a warrior's heart. But one bomb capable of erasing a city revealed a far more devastating truth. American industrial and scientific power had reached a level that made further Japanese resistance not just costly, But meaningless. It implied that America had been developing these weapons in absolute secrecy, while fighting a two-ocean war. And it implied something even more devastating, that everything Japan's military leadership believed about modern warfare had become obsolete overnight. At 1,600 hours, intelligence officer Colonel Hideaki Sato delivered the afternoon analysis. His team had tracked American industrial output since 1941, and their figures had always been precise, disturbingly so. America had produced 88,410 tanks, Japan, 6,450. America had built 41 aircraft carriers, Japan, 15. American shipyards launched cargo vessels faster than German U-boats could sink them. But Sato's new calculation shattered even the grim logic of those comparisons. If, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, the Americans can destroy entire cities with a single bomb, then their scientific capabilities render all numerical comparisons meaningless. They are not fighting the same war we are. Foreign Minister Togo quietly spoke the fear that hung unspoken in the room. And if they possess one such bomb, we must assume they possess more. For years, Japan's understanding of American power had been built on a foundation of comforting illusions, beliefs repeated in staff meetings, strategic memos, and internal reports. Those beliefs would be obliterated in the days following Hiroshima. But to understand what the High Command finally realized, one must first understand what they had convinced themselves to believe. In November 1941, Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, commander of the Combined Fleet, had offered the most accurate assessment of American industrial might that any Japanese leader would voice before or during the war. His warning, recorded in naval staff minutes, was stark: "I can run wild for 6 months or a year, but I have no confidence for the second or third year." Yamamoto had lived in America. He had studied at Harvard, served as a naval attaché in Washington, and seen American factories with his own eyes. His calculations were grounded not in hope or nationalism, but in arithmetic. America's steel production alone exceeded Japan's entire industrial output. American petroleum reserves dwarfed Japan's fragile dependence on imported oil. Yet Yamamoto's warnings had been ignored by many of the same officers now sitting in an underground bunker, staring at the implications of Hiroshima's annihilation. Army strategic planning documents from 1941, later recovered from wartime archives, revealed the alternative narrative that Japan's military leadership chose to embrace instead. They believed American industrial power could be neutralized by 3 factors. The first was distance. Japan's conquests would create a defensive perimeter so vast that American logistics would collapse under their own weight. Every ship, every bomb, every bullet would need to travel over 5,000 miles of hostile ocean before reaching the battlefield. Japan, by contrast, could sustain its forces through nearby occupied territories. America, they insisted, would exhaust itself trying to supply a war fought an ocean away. The second pillar was morale. Japanese planners believed American society was soft, individualistic, and incapable of accepting heavy casualties. They assumed that after losing 30,000 to 40,000 men, U.S. public opinion would demand negotiations. Japanese willingness to die, they believed, would outlast America's willingness to fight. The third pillar was tactical superiority. Through superior training, warrior spirit, and battlefield innovation, Japanese forces were expected to inflict casualty ratios that would nullify American numerical advantages. One Japanese soldier, doctrine claimed, equaled 3 or 4 Americans in combat effectiveness. These assumptions collapsed at every major battle of the Pacific War. Yet the High Command continually reinterpreted defeats as confirmation of their theories, claiming they needed refinement, not replacement. At Midway, June 1942, Japan lost 4 aircraft carriers in a single day. The official explanation blamed bad luck and tactical mistakes, not American code-breaking or the inherent fragility of Japan's carrier-heavy strategy. The belief in Japan's ability to overcome numerical inferiority survived intact. At Guadalcanal, August 1942 to February 1943, Japan discovered that Americans could sustain long-distance logistics and could match Japanese soldiers in jungle warfare. The official assessment blamed local commanders for insufficient fighting spirit, not the impossibility of the overall strategy. The belief in America's weak morale persisted. By August 1945, every major assumption had been dismantled by reality, yet never formally acknowledged. General Annemy's insistence on fighting to the last civilian was not madness, it was the inevitable conclusion of beliefs that had never been questioned. The afternoon of August 6 marked the first moment in the entire war when the Supreme War Council directly confronted these illusions. Intelligence Colonel Sato presented what he called the reality assessment, a report his team had prepared over 6 months but had not been allowed to deliver until now. The numbers were devastating. American aircraft production in 1944 alone exceeded Japan's total output for the entire war. U.S. shipyards built escort carriers faster than Japan could train pilots. American ammunition plants produced more shells in a week than Japan produced in a month. But the most damning figures concerned scientific research. Sato's network had documented American research programs involving over 130,000 scientists and engineers working on military technology. Japan's entire effort employed roughly 6,000. American universities, Harvard, MIT, Berkeley, Chicago, each maintained physics departments larger than Japan's entire scientific establishment. The atomic bomb, Sato explained quietly, required facilities we could not have built even if we had understood the theory. The United States had constructed entire secret cities: Oak Ridge, Tennessee; Hanford, Washington; Los Alamos, New Mexico. These sites consumed more electricity than major Japanese cities and employed 130,000 workers. The Manhattan Project cost $2 billion, more than Japan spent on its entire war effort in 1944. Then Foreign Minister Togo asked the question that would echo through future trials and histories: how could we not know? Sato's answer was painfully simple. We did know, Foreign Minister. Our intelligence reported America's industrial expansion continuously. We intercepted communications about large secret projects. We documented their scientific recruitment. But every report was dismissed as exaggeration or propaganda. We chose not to know, Sato continued, because knowing would have required admitting we could not win. Admiral Toyota followed with his own bitter judgment. The Americans fought this war with one hand tied behind their back. They fought Germany and Japan at the same time while developing weapons we cannot even comprehend. They produced more war material than we believed physically possible, yet their civilian economy continued to exceed peacetime levels. They are not merely stronger than us. They operate on an entirely different level of civilization. This idea, that America represented not just a superior force but a different category of capability, marked a profound shift in understanding. For 4 years, Japanese propaganda had insisted Americans were materialistic, weak, and dependent on machines because they lacked spiritual strength. The atomic bomb exposed this narrative as disastrously wrong. Cabinet Secretary Hizutsun Sakamizu wrote in his diary that evening, "We have been fighting an enemy we never understood. We assumed they thought as we thought, that their society functioned as ours functioned, that their limits matched our limits. Hiroshima proves we were fighting blind." August 7, 1945 began with confirmation that made Hiroshima even more incomprehensible. Reconnaissance aircraft finally able to penetrate the radiation zone transmitted photographs that reached high command within hours. Major Sunio Kitamura, pilot of the first successful mission, described weather conditions unlike anything he had encountered: updrafts so powerful they hurled his aircraft upward 2,000 feet in seconds, temperatures that overwhelmed his instruments, and smoke rising in a column straight into the stratosphere. By 1100 hours, the developed photographs revealed what analysts initially refused to believe. Approximately 4 square miles of the city had been completely leveled, not destroyed in the conventional sense, but erased. Buildings were not collapsed, they were vaporized. Reconnaissance teams estimated that everything within 1 mile of ground zero had ceased to exist in any recognizable form. Intelligence analysts compared the images to conventional bombing raids. The most destructive attack of the war, the Tokyo firebombing of March 9 to 10, 1945, had required 334 B-29s dropping 1,665 tons of incendiaries over 3 hours. Hiroshima had suffered greater destruction from a single bomb, dropped by a single aircraft, in a single instant. The Supreme War Council reconvened at 1400 hours on August 7 with intelligence that completely reshaped the strategic landscape. Soviet Foreign Minister Vyacheslav Molotov had summoned Japanese Ambassador Naoto Sato to the Kremlin at midnight. The message was blunt: the Soviet Union considered itself at war with Japan effective August 9, 1945. This announcement destroyed Japan's final strategic hope. For months, Japanese diplomats had desperately pursued Soviet mediation, imagining Stalin might secure terms that preserved part of the empire and prevented occupation. With the Soviets entering the war, this fantasy collapsed instantly. Multiple witnesses recorded that General Anami went pale as the implications sank in. Japan now faced annihilation on all fronts: American atomic weapons from the east, Soviet armies from the north, British Commonwealth forces from the south, and continued Chinese resistance across the mainland. The empire that had once stretched from India to the mid-Pacific was being crushed back toward the home islands. Foreign Minister Togo summarized the situation with devastating clarity. "We have three choices: surrender unconditionally, fight until every city is destroyed by atomic weapons, or fight until Soviet and American forces invade and Japan ceases to exist as a nation. There are no other options." August 8 brought fragmented intelligence about Soviet movements. The Red Army had launched a massive assault into Manchuria with overwhelming strength. The Guandong Army, once the elite of Japan's forces, was being dismantled with ease. Soviet tank columns advanced 50 miles in the first day, sweeping aside resistance with the skill of forces hardened by the destruction of Nazi Germany. The Manchurian offensive revealed another uncomfortable truth about American power: Soviet troops were equipped with thousands of American trucks, vehicles, radios, and supplies delivered through Lend-Lease. The United States had not only supplied its own war effort across two oceans, it had equipped its allies at levels Japan could barely comprehend. A single American program, Lend-Lease, had provided more material to the Soviet Union than Japan's entire industrial output across the entire war. At 11:02 hours on August 9, a second atomic bomb obliterated Nagasaki. The message from the Nagasaki Regional Command was even shorter than Hiroshima's: second atomic attack. City destroyed. Casualties catastrophic. Then silence. The emergency session of the Supreme War Council that afternoon descended into something unprecedented in Japanese military culture: open acknowledgement of complete strategic failure. Navy Minister Admiral Mitsumasa Yanai spoke with remarkable candor. "The Americans have shown they can destroy our cities at will, one by one, until nothing remains. They have shown they can continue this indefinitely. We cannot defend against weapons we cannot detect until they explode. Our anti-aircraft defenses are useless. Our fighters cannot intercept what they cannot find. Our civil defenses are meaningless." Army Chief of Staff General Yamazu offered a judgment that, only weeks before, would have been considered treasonous: the atomic bomb overturned every principle on which Japan's wartime strategy depended. Mass troops became targets. Entire cities became targets. Our doctrine of resisting to the last citizen assumed the Americans would need to invade to occupy the homeland. But if they could erase cities without ever landing troops, then our entire defensive plan collapsed. They could annihilate Japan without crossing the shoreline. That evening, intelligence officers estimated that the United States likely possessed 3 to 7 additional atomic bombs, with the capability to produce more. Even if this number was exaggerated, even if America had only one more, the conclusion was unchanged: continued resistance meant national suicide. Cabinet Secretary Sakamizu recorded the Emperor's private words that night. His Majesty stated that the unendurable must be endured. The atomic bomb had made one truth undeniable: prolonging the war would bring the complete destruction of the Japanese people. The nation must accept terms that preserved its existence, no matter how painful. This phrase, "the unendurable must be endured," would become the heart of the surrender message. But moving from this private acknowledgement to a formal surrender required navigating fierce military resistance. On August 10, Japan transmitted its surrender offer through Swiss diplomats, accepting the Potsdam Declaration on the condition that the emperor's sovereignty remain. The American reply on August 12 was intentionally vague: the emperor would remain, but only under the authority of the supreme commander of the Allied powers, and his future position would be determined by the freely expressed will of the Japanese people. This ambiguity sparked the final crisis. Hardline officers, led by General Anami, rejected the terms outright. Their position had abandoned any hope of victory. They preferred national destruction to accepting occupation and foreign judgment. The diplomatic struggle dragged through late August and early September, but the psychological collapse of Japan's high command occurred by August 16. What followed was more than defeat, it was a complete re-evaluation of everything Japan had believed about war, industry, and its place in the world. The formal surrender aboard USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, forced Japanese leaders to confront the reality they had long denied. Foreign Minister Mamoru Shigemitsu wrote in his diary that the harbor was filled with American warships stretching to the horizon. Aircraft filled the sky in formations that blotted out the sun. The Americans made no threats, their sheer presence was enough. And, as Japanese officers learned, this vast armada represented only a portion of America's total strength. General Yoshijiro Yumisa noted that the location of the ceremony was itself a lesson. Japan surrendered aboard a battleship that America had built in less time than it took Japan to plan a single major naval operation. The Missouri was just one of dozens of capital ships the U.S. produced while fighting on two fronts and simultaneously developing atomic weapons. Japan had spent a decade preparing for war. America had outbuilt and outplanned them in 15 months. When occupation forces began arriving, Japanese observers documented what their leaders had refused to believe. One American infantry division operated more trucks than the entire Imperial Army. American troops received fresh food while Japanese soldiers starved. American field hospitals treated wounds considered hopeless in Japanese medicine. Every detail confirmed that pre-war intelligence had been accurate and had been ignored. Colonel Sato's final report, Why We Lost, written in September 1945 and now archived in the National Institute for Defense Studies, stated bluntly, "We lost the war in December 1941 when we attacked an enemy we did not understand. Every battle afterward was the inevitable mathematics." American industrial capacity exceeded Japan's by factors of 10 to 20. Their scientific resources dwarfed Japan's entire educated population. Their raw materials were limitless. Japan had fought believing spirit could defeat material reality. It could not. Occupation authorities later revealed American production numbers that confirmed the scale of Japan's miscalculation: 88,410 tanks, 257,000 artillery pieces, 2.4 million trucks, 17 million rifles, and 41 billion rounds of ammunition, all produced while maintaining a civilian standard of living higher than Japan had enjoyed even in peacetime. Former Prime Minister Suzuki summed it up: "We thought we fought a nation of merchants, soft, comfortable, unwilling to sacrifice. We were catastrophically mistaken. We fought the most productive civilization in human history, one that could sustain mass consumer life and total war production simultaneously. They did not choose between butter and guns. They produced both on a scale we could not conceive." Details of the Manhattan Project were even more humbling. It employed 130,000 people, cost more than Japan's entire 1944 military budget, and required electrical power greater than whole Japanese cities. Its scientific foundations exceeded anything Japanese laboratories had imagined possible. The atomic bomb was not merely a weapon, it was proof of a civilization operating on an industrial and intellectual level far beyond Japan's reach. Admiral Toyoda's 1946 assessment captured the final realization: we began the war believing democracy made America weak, diversity made them divided, and wealth made them soft. We ended it understanding that democracy created innovation, diversity supplied talent, and wealth funded capabilities we could never match. Every assumption we held was not simply wrong, but the precise opposite of the truth. The psychological consequences were profound. Some leaders, like General Anami, chose death rather than live with the scale of their error. Others, like Admiral Yanai, advocated complete demilitarization, recognizing that Japan's militarist ideology had created a system incapable of honest self-assessment. Many could not reconcile their warrior self-image with the fact that they had led their nation into an unwinnable war built on delusion. Historians later documented how intelligence warnings had been suppressed, accurate production figures dismissed as defeatism, and reports of American scientific progress ignored as harmful to morale. The command structure had created a world where truth was treason and wishful thinking was policy. The final and bitterest realization Japan's leaders accepted was that America had never fought at full strength. The U.S. waged a two-ocean war while keeping forces in reserve, developing next-generation weapons, and preparing for future conflicts. The atomic bombs were not the peak of American effort, they were a demonstration of what America could accomplish while doing many other things at once. Japan, by contrast, had thrown every last resource into the war. America had fought with comfortable margins everywhere. By 1947, during occupation interviews, the transformation of Japan's military mindset was complete. General Yumizu summarized the truth they had understood too late: we lost because we never understood our enemy. We assumed they shared our limits, scarcity, rigidity, narrow resources, when they possessed the opposite. We believed our propaganda instead of our intelligence. The atomic bomb did not defeat us, it merely proved the defeat we had already suffered the moment we chose war against a nation we did not comprehend. Courage cannot defeat chemistry. Spirit cannot overcome steel. Determination means nothing when your enemy has both determination and 10 times your capacity to give it physical form.